Good day, folks, and welcome to review number 44. After the bad review that I gave the Fall of Cybertron Jazz figure, I felt like I needed to cleanse my palate. So today we're stepping back in time, and we're going to take a look at the Generation 1 reissue Jazz. Taking a real brief look at the packaging here, obviously you can see this is not the original G1 Jazz packaging, and the reason for that is twofold. A, the original packaging for my G1 Jazz disappeared somewhere about 30 years ago, and B, my original G1 Jazz itself has long disintegrated as being one of the most played with toys I had as a child. So this is a reissue Jazz that I picked up at TFCon this year. And as you can see, it's got some artwork of Jazz on the front, and it has a window here that you can open in the front with the figure clearly displayed in vehicle mode over here, and some of the other G1 reissues advertised on the front flap. If you look on the back, you do have tech specs here, as well as some G1 artwork across the bottom. So here we have Jazz in his vehicle mode, and this was a representation of the Porsche 935, and it's a fairly decent representation of it. Again, this being the reissue version, rather than having the Martini logo on the side here, it says Meister instead, because they couldn't deal with the licensing issues with the reissue, but it's a fairly decent vehicle mode. Now I do have a little discoloring here because this particular figure was a used figure and was obviously displayed at some point, and the white paint has yellowed a little bit on some of the clear plastic bits. So let's do a comparison now in vehicle modes to two of the most recent releases of Jazz. You have the Fall of Cybertron Jazz, which I recently reviewed, and you also have the Reveal the Shield Classic Style Jazz. Now you can obviously see the inspiration from the original G1 Jazz into the other two vehicles, but obviously the Fall of Cybertron version has taken a much more stylistic approach to give the more Cybertronian feel. But the influence is still there. So let's look at Jazz's transformation. Now it's very obvious that this transformation process is from the early days of Transformers. The parts tend to be loose, with most of the parts not really having any tabs or pegs to hold them in place. The only articulation to speak of is at the arms, and really that articulation is just a result of the way the arms fold under the car for the vehicle mode. By today's standards, this transformation would be considered pretty poor, but by 1984 standards, this was all pretty cool. Any diehard Transformers fan, even if you aren't a G1 collector, should at least transform a few G1 toys to appreciate how toy engineering has advanced over the last 30 years. So here we have the robot figure itself, and you are quickly reminded about how simple the G1 robot modes were. Basically, they took the vehicles first and tried to make whatever robot mode they could out of them, rather than today where there's pre-existing characters and then they try to match the vehicle to the character. But there are some traits that are very typical Jazz. You know, you've got the hood chest piece here. You've got Jazz's visor, but then you've got the Jazz's wing doors here. Some things, though, that don't seem, as the way we've grown to know the character of Jazz, seem a little atypical. I mean, it's a much stouter robot, almost, kind of chubby. He's got these little short stubby arms, which is different from a lot of times now Jazz is almost portrayed as a ninja, and a lot of these proportions don't fit that characteristic. Now this particular figure, it did not come with the sticker sheet, so a lot of the stickers are not applied. I do plan on getting some repro labels here at some point and correcting this, but it does bring back a lot of memories. I have a lot of fond memories of playing with Jazz in my sandbox, on the sidewalks, all over the place, which is why the toy ended up basically falling apart at one point. But it's definitely brings back good memories of my childhood. Again, let's compare the G1 Jazz here to some of his latest incarnations. Again, we have the Fall of Cybertron Jazz here, and the Reveal the Shield Jazz. And it really is amazing to see just how far engineering has come since the days of the late 70s, early 80s, when the original Jazz was designed. Just the amount of posability, the newer types of joints they have, it's just a marvel to see how far things have come. And you can see a lot of the character influences from the original toy that have carried over, more so in the Reveal the Shield figure than the Fall of Cybertron figure, and I think maybe that might add to why I don't care for the Fall of Cybertron figure as much. With the Reveal the Shield Jazz over here, you've got the same chest style as the G1. You've got the wheels on the shoulders, you've got the door wings over here, just little things like the little slats on his feet down here that carry over to his shins over here. Even some of the details you have on his abdomen are carried over on the Reveal the Shield figure, while the Fall of Cybertron Jazz, his chest is angled down more than straight. He doesn't have the wheels up on the shoulders like you'd typically think of. The colors are a little off. And then when you throw onto that the fact the finicky nature of the Fall of Cybertron's transformation, he just doesn't quite do it for me. Even the G1 Jazz, I think, has, maybe because of fond memories, but I actually care for the G1 Jazz a little bit more than the Fall of Cybertron Jazz. Not necessarily for the engineering, but for the look of the character. Jazz was one of my very first Transformers as a kid, and one of the most played with, too. Along with Optimus Prime and Grimlock, Jazz was one of the figures that I actually wore out to the point where he fell apart. Now, I always appreciate a good homage to my favorite toys as a kid, but when you do it, you need to do it right. I wouldn't call myself a die-hard G1er, but I do expect a certain amount of respect to be paid to the toys and characters that started this franchise. It's too bad that the Fall of Cybertron toys haven't done this, at least from my perspective.